Now, I got to say, when I get a topic like this, I like to sort of like throw it into the universe and say, what am I really supposed to talk about on this message? And allow intuition and the universe to bring me stuff. So this past week, my wife and I were out camping in the beautiful mountains here in Colorado, watching the sunset come down, and it was just a beautiful experience with our chocolate lab, Penny, who's running around the wild self that she is. And as always, when I'm going on camping trips, I usually bring a book with me to read. And lately, I've been into a lot of the roots of New Thought, philosophy, and so forth. And the book that I had brought with me was a book by a guy by the name of Neville Goddard. You may know Neville. Neville, he often goes by the one name. There's lots of audios and stuff from out online. And this book was called The Power of Awareness. So I'm sitting down at the campsite, and I'm starting with chapter 1. Let me just read you. At first, it goes with a Bible quote, which says, "All things, when they are admitted, are made manifest by the light. For everything that is made manifest is light." Everything that is made manifest is light. Wow, that's the first statement. So naturally, I'm talking about light, and I read this when I'm sitting around camping, and I think, well, we got to work that in somehow. Let me go on. But then Goddard talks about, or Neville, I'm just going to read to the first paragraph. The light, in quote, is consciousness. Think about that for a moment. Consciousness is one, manifesting in legions of forms or levels of consciousness. There is no one that is not all that is. For consciousness, though expressed in an infinite series of levels, is not divisional. He goes on from there in the paragraph, but I'm not going to read the whole thing in this moment. But he's got a lot packed in there. But I read that and I thought, okay, there's some message I'm supposed to bring today relative to that. So what is this light? Well, this seems like a self-evident question in a way. We know what light is. I mean, it's like, we look up at the sun, light's coming down at us. We look up at the light fixtures here, this candle burning on this altar. They're emitting something called light. We have the sensory apparatus, our eyes and our brains, which are receiving light waves, and we're transferring within our brains to some visual signal. So that's the light that we've often been thought about. So when we say the word light, typically that's the concept that we want that immediately gets put into our awareness. But what I want to invite you to think about is that's a very limited aspect of light. That's the aspect of light that relates to us on this physical plane, as physical material beings. Whenever I come and talk with you at CSL Denver, I always use this statement. You probably anticipated I would work it in some way, but we're spiritual beings having a human experience, that we live in two worlds simultaneously. We have one foot in a human world of material stuff, and we have one foot in the spiritual world that's beyond here. But lately, I've been sort of expanding on that 2 foot leaning back and forth kind of metaphor and talking about the fact that we're actually in a sliding scale where we're both in material form at sort of the lowest level, if you could imagine it. And we are spiritual beings at our highest essence. And there are gradations in between. And we can slide up and down the scales. And so we know when we're in the physical world, because we were knocking around and we're touching stuff and we're seeing things and we're having sensory experiences. But we're also going to slide up the scale, and we do this all the time. The very fact that you're listening to me, somewhere within you is a conscious awareness of my words, and you're processing those in your mind, your use of the mind. And so you have a mental realm within you as well. So right now you're experiencing the two realms simultaneously. But you also have within you an essence that's drawing you to something greater, that greatest expression of yourself, a greater understanding of the mystery of life that we're in. What is God? What happens after we die? All of these big questions of life that are driving us to come to places like spiritual centers are driving us to the highest essence of our being, to this non-material realm. So we're on this, I want you to picture this. We're on a continuum from the material to the emotional, to the spiritual, to the mental, to the spiritual. We're on this, and we navigate along this continuum every day in our lives, moving along that continuum. And so when we talk about light from the sun, light from this altar's candle, our sensory processing of light, we're using that from the material, physical aspect of light. But light is also playing out in the mental realms, in our mental experience. Light is also playing out in the spiritual realms. So let me go back to Neville's quote for a minute, with that anchored in your awareness, that multi-dimensional aspect of light. And let's reread what he wrote at the beginning of this book. His words were, again, in that paragraph as he stalls to find the page. The light is consciousness. Well, it means something. No, it's not just in the physical, we're consciousness. Consciousness is one, manifesting in legions of forms. We're the legions of forms, folks. So it's those chairs, that door. We're in legions of forms. Or levels of consciousness. As we move up this continuum into the mental realm and the spiritual realm, light is playing out there. There is no one that is not all that is, for consciousness, though expressed in an infinite series of levels, is not divisional. You get that? It's expressing along this continuum in different ways, but it's not divided. It's all one. Everything is one. And it's consciousness. It's consciousness. Based on the teachings of Science of Mind and Ernest Holmes, I thought, what did Ernest say about this topic? And I want to mention just a couple of things. One is, Ernest did write a lot about the light. And in fact, he wrote a really beautiful essay called Cosmic Light, which is available at the Science of Mind Archives website if you're a member, or you can purchase it. But it's also included in a book that's no longer in print. It's called Light. And it's a series of essays by different people, but one of the people is, of course, Ernest Holmes. And I want to read you just a brief section of what Ernest talks about in terms of cosmic light. This is light at that higher level, that higher scale of the sliding scale I was talking about. He's trying to get us to move beyond the limited aspect of light and see light in this larger vision. Here's what Holmes wrote. He said, the mystics, or those who were illumined, have all had an experience in common. They've all seen the cosmic light. That is why they said that they were illumined. They have all had much the same experience, whether it was Moses coming down from the mountain, whether it was Jesus after the resurrection, whether it was Saul on the return to Damascus, whether it was Plotinus, who, according to his pupils, had 7 distinct periods of illumination. Emerson, walking across the common at Concord, suddenly became conscious of this light. Whitman refers to it as that which struck its forked tongue into his being as he lay on the grass. Edward Carpenter, after leaving Whitman, walked across the bridge and, looking up, thought all of New York City was alive, and there are recorded many lesser degrees of illumination. The mystics have all sensed this light, and we all do at times. That's key, because we all do at times. You have, I have, if we're open to it. Sometimes we deny it, we turn it off. In varying degrees, we do enter into this mystical sense, this illumination. I feel that if a spiritual mind treatment could be seen, and that's our form of prayer that we use here, if it could be seen, I feel that it would be seen as a pathway of light. All spiritually minded metaphysical practitioners, when they are treating, praying, knowing the truth, often experience a light about something, and that they are immersed in light. What Holmes is calling us in the rest of that essay, which you can find online again at the Science of Mind Archives, is he's calling us to develop that sense of that light at the higher mystical levels within our being. And so when we're stepping into the light, not only are we stepping into the fullness of ourselves in this world of form, but we're stepping into higher levels of light. You know, I've been blessed lately to be working on another project. I've sort of, over the last year and a half or so, become sort of the informal historian for the archives, doing a lot of research work for them. I might have mentioned this the last time I was here, was that one project that's taken up a lot of my time is that we are currently working on a new Ernest Holmes book, which will be coming out in August. It's called Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. We are so far into the process of this book. I compiled the book and wrote the intro for the book, and we're now working through the process of the layout and of the book, and it's going to be in print and rolled out and for the first time in several years, the organization is going to Asilomar this August. So we have a conference there, and I'll be doing a presentation at Asilomar where we'll be rolling out this book and explaining its how it was generated and a lot of info about it and what Ernest Holmes' experiences were when he was at Asilomar in the 1950s. So I'm really excited about the project. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to bring light and talk about light here today, I might want to share some of this stuff from this book that's coming out. So I went back and looked at some of this, and this is from the book that's not yet published, of some of Ernest Holmes' talks that he gave at Asilomar at their summer conferences in the 1950s to see what he might have said about light. So I wanted to read. These passages are a little long. I apologize, but I did shorten them a tad, but I just want to give you just a sense, because he was really, and this is in his later years of life, when he was much more into mystical stuff than I think in his early years. This comes from his lecture of August 18th, 1956, where he wrote on the topic, Our Religious Science. He wrote, one of the first things I learned when very young, going out into the woods with a very great artist who happened to be a woman, that she wanted to paint trees. And when we would paint a tree, she'd go up to it and hug it and kiss it and talk to it. And I didn't think she was crazy. I was only about 10. I knew she knew something I didn't know, but I didn't think she was crazy. I knew she was communing through what I later discovered is an interior awareness with that which otherwise seems so static, so inanimate, so uncommunicative, and that there is such a reality to everything. Everything in this physical universe gives forth a light. All things give forth an inner light, emanations thin as air. Light clouds draped around the luminous form are in all things everywhere. That is as much as I can remember of this. I wrote about it a long time ago. This light is real. It's not a fantasy. It's not a psychic hallucination. There is a light that lighteth every man's path. We have sought to discover the avenues through which we approach this light and loose this imprisoned splendor. And later in the same talk, he adds this. Jesus was a cosmic man, disclosing universal truths in a language of relativity, which is the only language we humans have. Cosmic man, high on the scale, relativity down here in the physical world. Okay, that's what he's saying. Okay, that is one of the difficulties. We're four-dimensional beings living in a three-dimensional world, and the world in which we live has very little in it to describe that other thing, that light we all know. I know I have seen it many times, and you must have. It must be a common denominator. That light that lighteth every man's path is real. Wow. Beautiful words.